fathers tend to feel that, it doesn't really matter if they're there because kids don't seem to care. And they can result in dads, withdrawing. And those things really lead to, less than ideal outcomes.
Have you ever wondered, does my child even like me? Maybe they run to mom when they're hurt. Maybe they seem uninterested when you walk through the door. Maybe every attempt to connect feels awkward or gets rejected. But what if these moments don't mean what you think they mean? Research on attachment shows that children can form strong, secure attachments with multiple caregivers, including fathers, and they often express those attachments differently than adults expect. Studies have found that fathers play a unique role in their children's emotional, social, and cognitive development, particularly through play, exploration, and confidence building experiences. In fact, a child's strongest attachment behaviors often emerge when they feel stressed, scared, or need comfort, not necessarily in everyday interactions. This means a child's preference in a particular moment isn't a reliable measure of how much they love, trust, or feel or value their dad. So today we're unpacking what attachment really means, what signs dads often misread, and how to build a stronger connection with your child. So, as always, you are watching the Dad Central Show. It is a show about parenting to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. Our show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care because Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. And finally, we would love you to send in some questions and we love to answer your questions about fatherhood during our shows. So please email your questions to podcast@dadcentral.ca. And today we're talking about, does my child even like me? Understanding attachment as a dad. How you doing, Drew? And what do you think about this subject?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, Ed. You and I were talking about the weather and enjoying the fact that we could be outside a lot more in this part of the country. It is by far my favorite time of the year. But unfortunately, I have that countdown timer going because I feel like it never lasts long enough. But other than that, it's exciting. World Cup is getting started. There's a lot happening as the summer gets underway, and of course, it's busy for a lot of different things. And but in terms of the topic, attachment, I think it's something that we may not understand as well as dads, but we certainly experience it, some of the good and the bad. And so I think that's why the having a conversation about what attachment is and how it relates can really help fathers in some of the situations that I remember when my kids were young, very young. I didn't understand all of this stuff, and I actually felt I got hurt a bit by their behavior because and then I had some of my own negative thoughts about it that had I known some of this information, I think I would have been able to respond differently. So from my lived experience, I'd say it's also valuable because it might help prevent some of the unfortunate things that sometimes derail dads in their attempts to really be connected to their kids.
Excellent. So what we're going to cover today are why dads ask this question, also what attachment actually means, also signs your child is more attached than you realize, and then how dads can strengthen attachment. So let's kick it off, Drew, with our first talking point. Why dads ask this question?
Yeah, well, every dad's going to be a little bit different. That's my disclaimer at the opening. But there are some common things, right, that I hear from many dads, and especially some of the new dads. You know, your child only wants mom, whether it's bedtime, whether it's sort of snack time, whether it's just the times when you're like, oh, I can do this, right? But they only seem to want mom. Sometimes kids ignore dad, right? You've been away from them most of the time, and you come back home, and you're excited to see them, but they don't seem to be so excited to see you, or worse, they're kind of more distant. And so that can be hard. Depending on their age and stage, teens in particular can seem very distant, a little bit aloof, all into their own world. And so that can be interpreted as, they're not interested. They don't really want to be around your dad. Or you try and get in there. You're persistent. You want to engage with your kids, but they ultimately kind of reject that. They're like, no, I don't want to. Not interested. All of your attempts get kind of pushed away. So I think those are some common things that I've heard from dads, but I've also experienced in my own fatherhood journey as well, and how I responded early on versus how I respond now. And I'll use Aliana as an example to some of the things that she does. I understand it very differently. But ultimately, fathers tend to feel either not needed, not wanted. That it doesn't really matter if they're there because the kids don't seem to care. You're not important to them, or even questioning whether you're doing it right, or you're doing everything okay, or are you failing at this thing. So there's a lot of potentially negative um, thoughts that come from some of these feelings that happen, and they can result in dads withdrawing, or worse, getting angry, and getting resentful and bitter, and those things really lead to less than ideal outcomes in long term if they're not addressed. And so that's why I think it's important we talk about this, because as you said at the beginning, children's momentary preferences, like what they want, they don't define the overall quality of the relationship or how much you matter to them.
Excellent. Good stuff. Let's move on to our next segment. What attachment actually means. And you had said at the beginning that dads could understand the whole area of attachment. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, they've evolved over the years. I like to think of attachment as the word trust. Do your children trust you to be there for them when they need you most? And the other things that come part of trust are things like feeling safe, like physical safety, but also emotional and psychological safety. And that there's a sense of security with your caregiver. And we know that there's sort of two pathways to this way. One is the typical maternal paradigm of care, comfort, compassion, bringing them close, holding them there, keeping them safe from the world. But the other pathway that actually develops trust and safety is kids knowing that it's okay for them to go out and explore the world, take some risks in case, and then when maybe they fall down, that who's there available to pick them back up or to be there for them. And often dads are great catalysts for risk taking, exploration type of behavior, which also builds trust. And so there's those two pathways that I think we often think of the first pathway most of the time, but dads really are gifted and talented and naturally drawn towards the other pathway. And that does build trust. Now, of course, it can't be wild, reckless, unsafe where people are going to get seriously hurt. But, it's the example that we often share is there's a short video of a little girl. She got her foot and her boot stuck in a tree. And so dad is there videotaping, and he's encouraging her that she can do it. He might give her a tip or two. And then she's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And he doesn't step in. He lets her figure it out. And eventually what happens is that she actually gets her boots out of the tree. And then you should see the look on her face of like, wow, like, she is amazed at look what she did. So she learned that she had capacity. She could do things, and dad didn't, come in and rescue her right away. And so the kids are talking years later, how she reflected and said, I thought that was amazing that my dad would do that, and I really felt more confidence. And so you see the impact of these natural sort of fatherhood allowing risk to happen. That's an important pathway for attachment. So I wanted to talk about that. And those two pathways ultimately help kids feel safe. They feel that the adults in their lives can be trusted to care for them and help meet their needs, but also to trust them to take risks and go out. And so fathers, are, I think, really gifted because they can help create adventure. They can do play. They can help people build confidence. They can help kids learn to problem solve. And that is tremendously valuable for building a secure and attached relationship. So, you know, ultimately, attachment isn't measured by who gets the most hugs, right? It's measured by that sense of trust, security, and connection. And the final thing I'll share is, we were at a birthday party this weekend, and what I noticed is that Eliana knew most of the people, but she didn't know them that well, and she wasn't, I'll say, that comfortable. And so, ironically enough, she was fine with mom, but she kept gravitating and coming to me. She wanted me to pick her up. She wanted me to hold her. She wanted to be on my lap. She wanted me to take her and explore and be with her while she was, going to the pool and doing these other things. And so, this is just an example of where you can have a secure attachment and the children will gravitate towards either one of the parents at any given time.
All right. In our next section, again, I have a few, we're always doing education, but we're going to talk about signs your child is more attached than you realize. What are some signs that you want to
Yeah.
share with her?
Why don't we just go back and forth on these?
Sure.
Yeah. So the first one is that they seek you out for specific activities, right? Eliana always wants me to come on the trampoline with her. Daddy, come jump on the trampoline with me. One example.
Next up, they share their excitement and accomplishments with you. And I want to just go a little bit further with this. You may think that this is not a big thing, but it is a huge thing. It's a little thing, but it's a huge thing. They chose you to share their accomplishments more than anybody else. They chose you. So that should show you that, you know what? That's huge. They're attached to me. They can share with me. Next
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, this one's interesting because it's counterintuitive. They test the boundaries with you, meaning like they're pushing the boundaries. And the reason is the kids, they often like to push limits with the people they feel safest around. And so you may not like it, and it may be challenging to deal with. But if you see that your kids are pushing the boundaries and testing you, that should be a good sign. Feel affirmed that they trust you and feel safe with you.
Also, and piggybacking on what Drew said, this may bother you, but they imitate you. So obviously, there's something that they want to copy from what you are, what you do. Now, most cases should be good, but children copy the people who matter to them. So we've got to realize if they're copying you, that means there's something that matters with you that's important to them. So don't forget that one. Next
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. And they check to see if you're watching. Right. So even independent children, and I would say Eliana, the youngest, I mean, most of the kids are, but Eliana in particular, flexing that independent muscle, she's often looking back and wanting to see that dad is there watching or what's going on, or she'll be more like, daddy, look, right? So if you are getting that, that's a good sign.
Wonderful. And just to end off on that section, we just want to say that attachment always or often shows up in subtle behaviors that dads overlook. So it's, again, the little things. Don't forget the little things and don't miss out on the little things. And our final segment, how dads can strengthen attachment. Drew?
Yeah. And we'll go back and forth on these two. So, number one, create consistent connection rituals. So for me and my kids, bedtime is a consistent ritual, right? And I spend a few minutes with each kid every night at bedtime. It could be a Saturday morning breakfast. It could be you go for a walk together. A good friend of mine, we were just talking, he picks his teenage son up from work, and, that drive home, he creates a good amount of space, and all of a sudden, if he waits a few minutes, his son will open up. And so those opportunities for consistency to build connection are really valuable.
Next up, follow their interests. So join their world instead of making them part of your world. So go to them. I heard a very interesting quote the other day that if you want someone to go with you, you got to go to their bus stop. So I'm encouraging dads, go to your child's bus stop. If you want them to ride with you, you got to go to their bus stop.
Yeah.
Strategy 3.
Be emotionally available. And I go reflect back on our conversation with Ralph Anania, and he was sharing about when he went through his divorce and his kids were with him full time, and he really wanted to make sure he was providing for them, very much physically and financially and all those other things. But he talked about, upon reflection, his kids really needed him to be there emotionally. They needed a safe place to be able to share, to unload some of the big feelings that they might be experiencing, or just to get things off their chest that they didn't feel like they could share it anywhere else. And so, the really important key here for dads is you need to learn how to listen without fixing. Okay, it's not a problem for you to solve when your kids start sharing, what they're experiencing. It's important that they feel that you are hearing them. You need to validate that their feelings make sense and that you understand what they're feeling. And you want to be as present as possible during difficult emotions. And I can be the first one to tell you that's not easy, especially when they're expressing some big emotions and maybe explosively or disrespectfully. But the more that you can manage yourself to stay as present as possible in the face of their difficult emotions, you are helping them learn to regulate themselves and also to know that you can be trusted with these big feelings. And that is, to me, the most crucial step, especially as they age. And as kids grow, the problems become a little bit more and more complex. And so they need that space with that in particular.
Yeah, and our last point in this section is prioritize the small moments. And we've mentioned this throughout our conversation today, but prioritizing the small moments are really important. Research consistently shows that frequent positive interactions build stronger relationships than the grand gestures. So, as I always like to say, it's the little things that make or break the vine. Little things turn into big things. So, don't forget the small things. Very, very
Yeah.
important because they build up.
I'm going to add one story to finalize that point. And this is back from the research in, I think it was the late 60s, early 70s. I think Robert Rosenthal was a researcher, did it out in California. And short story is they told teachers, you've got a small group of exceptional students in your class. Here's the thing, though, you can't teach them any differently than the rest of the students in your class. So they said, okay. And so then they watched them for the entire year, people observing in the classroom to make sure there were no differences. And so at the end of the year, they tested the students, and sure enough, the small group of exceptional students that they expected, they they performed exceptionally well. They had the highest test scores. The catch was this: those students were randomly selected. They weren't special. So what happened? So the outcome that Rosenthal identified happened is that the teachers believed that these students were exceptional. And that belief translated into micro moments of interaction that were almost imperceptible because they were being observed. But they would, maybe a half second or a second longer of patience to allow a child to get it. They would touch the students, and this is back in the days when they could allow some of these things. They would touch the students a little bit more, again, almost imperceptible, than the other students that weren't as gifted. And so ultimately, the belief that the teachers had and these micro moments repeated every day throughout the school year led to the students performing exceptionally well. And so the takeaway for me is that, if you can, one, hold the belief that your children are connected to you, care about you, you love them, they love you, and that you're going to have a great relationship, that will then translate into some of your micro moment behaviors, even in the hard times. And that is going to, over time, lead to tremendous results, both for you and for your children.
Thank you for sharing that, Drew. Really valuable, great value add. So
I
let's do a
was,
recap today.
yeah,
We covered why dads ask this question. Also, what attachment really means or actually means. Then finally, excuse me, signs your child is more attached than you realize. Then finally, how dads can strengthen an attachment. So let's talk about some key takeaways. First of all, a child's preference in a moment is not a measure of love. Running to mom, rejecting a game, or seeming distant doesn't mean your child doesn't care about you. Number two, attachment looks different with dads. Children often connect with fathers through play, exploration, problem solving, and shared experiences. Number three, secure attachment is about safety and trust. The goal isn't to be your child's favorite parent, it's to be a reliable source of support and connection. Four, small, consistent moments matter the most. Strong father-child relationships are built, through everyday interactions over time. And then number five, your presence has lasting impact. Even when children don't express it openly, involved fathers contribute significantly to their child's emotional well-being, resilience, and development. So, Drew, what's our resource for our family today?
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to support dads through our father leader community. So, Dad Mentor is a resource that I really encourage you to check out, where you can come join other dads who are working hard at this role of fatherhood and getting resources, connections, and coaching that helps them achieve the goals that they have.
All right, so this is what we'll close up with today. If you ever wondered whether your child likes you, remember this: children don't always show connection in ways adults recognize. The question isn't whether you're getting enough signs of affection. The real question is whether you're showing up consistently, creating safety, and building trust. Because when dads do that, attachment grows and often it's stronger than they realize. So, my last question or closing question for everyone today is: what is one small, consistent way you can connect with your child this week that reminds them and you that the relationship matters? So, as always, want to say thank you so much for taking the most important thing, your time, to watch or listen to the show. As always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace, and we'll chat with you soon.